Chapter 10. The Tale of Azad Bakht. When the second dervish had finished telling his adventures, the night ended, and the finger of dawn was in the sky. The king, Azad Bakht, quietly went back to his own palace and bathed. Then, dressed superbly, he entered the throne room. There he gave orders that the Grand Vizier should attend him. "O Vizier," said he, "in such and such a place there are gathered 4 dervishes. Have them brought to me as speedily as you can. I very urgently require to see them here." "Lord," answered the minister, "to hear is to obey." He was just in time to observe the 4 dervishes washing themselves in preparation for going their several ways. "My master the king," said he, approaching them, "sends me with a message that he wishes you all to wait upon him in the hall of audience. Please be good enough to come with me." The 4 dervishes stood their ground and said, "Sir, we are our own masters and kings of our own destinies. Why should we come with you to a king of this world?" "Most reverend ones," said the vizier, "is there any harm in your visiting the palace for just a short time to please an unfortunate king?" The dervishes then recollected what the veiled horseman, who had rescued the first and second dervish from destruction, had said, and decided that they would go with the vizier. When they arrived in the throne room, the dervishes spoke a blessing to the king, saying, "Dear son, may it be well with you." "From where do you come, and to where do you go, O patched ones?" asked the king courteously. "We are dervishes," they replied in unison. "Where night finds us, that is our home." "Here is refreshment," said Azad Bakht. "Please enjoy it, and tell me all your adventures, for I am sure you must have had many and varied experiences." The dervishes replied, "Yes, indeed, much has happened to us, but we have not the strength to relate, nor the pleasure to tell the king about our austerities, troubles, and wanderings. Therefore, please allow us to refrain from the telling." At that the king stroked his beard and, smiling, said, "Allow me to tell you that last night, as you were each telling his own story, I was hidden there, and heard the tales of 2 of you. Now, I beg you, please tell me the others, so that I may learn from you and benefit accordingly." "We cannot tell," said the 2, hanging their heads with shame. "Do not ask us." "There is no one alive in this world to whom strange and well-nigh impossible things have not happened," said the king. "In fact, I will relate to you some most peculiar things which have happened to me, so that it will inspire you to talk about your adventures." "Do recite, O king, and may you be saved," said the dervishes together. Azad Bakht then began his story. "I was a quite young man when my father died, and I came to the throne after him. It was the very flower of my young days, and all this kingdom of Roum was under my command. It so happened that a merchant from the country of Badakhshan, famed for its fine rubies, came to the capital city of my land, and brought some wonderful merchandise. One of the finest of his treasures, which he brought to my court, was a certain ruby of more than half an ounce in weight. Although I was a monarch, I had never before seen in all my life a stone of such beauty and such worth, and desired to have it. The merchant, seeing the light in my eyes, at once offered it to me as a gift. I was delighted, and gave him many presents in return, and a robe of honour. I decreed that soldiers should protect the merchant wherever he went about his business in my country, gave him papers which would allow him to travel freely in any part of my dominions, and sent instructions to all my governors that he should be treated with great kindness wherever he went. Any loss which he sustained they should look upon as their own. I would send for the ruby each day to look upon it, and enjoy the colour as I held it up to the light, even during the time of my public audiences. One day, after I had handed it to several foreign nobles for them to admire, one of my valued advisers asked if he could speak a word in my ear. I at once granted him this favour, because of his age and the seniority in my service. "Sire," said he, very low, so that none but myself might hear. "You are a mighty king, and it is scarcely seemly that you should make so much of a mere stone, especially in the presence of all these foreigners here. True, it is unique in quality and colour, but it is after all only a stone. Suppose, when all the ambassadors return to their respective countries, they are asked what kind of man you are they only going to be able to say of you that you are the one who is always gazing with favour upon a red stone?" I was beginning to feel angry, but the old man continued. "Moreover, there is a man in Nishapur, in Persia, who has 12 rubies of this size sewn on a collar round his dog's neck." By now I had completely lost my temper and cried to my guards, "Put this vile old man to death for daring to speak to his king in this way." As the executioner was about to lead the old man away, the ambassador extraordinary of the Franks stood up and begged to speak to me. "What is it?" I shouted. "I wish to be told the nature of your ancient adviser's fault," he asked. "What greater fault can it be to lie to a king?" I cried in exasperation. "He may be right," he persisted. "Yet to put a person to death without any trial is not justice before God." "Is it possible that some cheap merchant of Persia, going from place to place with the greatest parsimony, should be able to sew 12 huge rubies on the collar of a dog?" I roared. "Nothing is impossible in the wide, wide world," said the ambassador. "Perhaps such a collar fell into the hands of a simple merchant. These sort of people often have peculiar tastes. But surely the service of a lifetime should not be lightly forgotten, as in the case of your old and valued adviser." I felt my anger cooling, and I said, "Very well, then. He shall go to a place of imprisonment for 1 year only. I spare his life. But if, in that space of time, his words are proved to be untrue, he shall die. If a merchant of Persia can be found who so decorates the neck of his hound, then he shall be completely pardoned." The ambassador made me a low bow, and I declared the court session to be ended. Now this adviser had a young daughter of about 15 or 16 years old, very pretty, and well grounded in the arts of reading, writing, and music. On the day in question she was playing in her room, when her mother came in and said, "Oh, my wretched child, I only wish that I had a blind or lame son instead of you, useless daughter." "Dear mother," said she, "what has happened?" "Your father has been locked away by order of the king for having said something which the king declares cannot possibly be true." "What can he have said which has caused this calamity?" asked the girl. "Is it not reported in every street in the town that your father said there is a Persian merchant in the bazaar of Nishapur who decorates the neck of his cur with a collar of 12 rubies? And what would a blind or lame son be able to do about this in the circumstances? Tell me that," she said to the distraught woman. "Why, even a blind or halt son would set off and go to the very ends of the earth, even to the land of China, to prove that his father was right," was the answer. "Let us offer our prayers," said the girl, "and attempt to relieve my father's distress in this way at least." So she tried to console her mother. But when all were asleep in the house, she crept from her bed, knocked on the door of her old nurse. "Good woman," said she, "if my father had had a son, indeed, would he have not gone to Nishapur in order to find out the truth of the dog's collar decorated with rubies? Now tell my mother nothing of this until morning. I wish you to ask your husband, who is so good in every way to the members of our family, to go with me to this strange Persian town of Nishapur this very night. I am determined to get my poor father released, for I know that he can only speak the truth." The woman pleaded with her young mistress for a while, but, seeing that she was so set in her plan to help her father, agreed. She roused her husband and bade him make preparations for the journey. When all was ready, he loaded camels and mules with provisions and gifts, and they set out. The vizier's daughter put on the garb of a man and joined him. When morning came, it was rumoured that the vizier's daughter had disappeared, but none knew whence or whither. The old nurse did not dare speak of the matter on pain of incurring the wrath of her mistress. Travelling stage by stage, the two finally arrived at Nishapur. At the caravanserai they rested their animals and unloaded the merchandise they had brought. The next day, the vizier's daughter put a rich robe over her male garments, in the style of the people of Roum, and began to explore the city of Nishapur. At last she reached a place where 4 great streets crossed, and a huge shop caught her eye, where a lot of very fine jewels were exposed for sale. Slaves with crossed arms in the most rich clothes were waiting to serve customers, and a man, who was obviously their superintendent, was also seated there, with many obviously highly important persons talking to him. The vizier's daughter, looking through the window, said to herself, "I wonder if this is the jeweller of whom my poor father spoke. I would to God that it were so." And then, looking around, she saw 2 men in iron cages suspended from the ceiling on hooks. They had long hair and long nails, and they sat in the cages with their heads on their knees. 2 gigantic Abyssinians with huge knives were on either sides of the cages. The vizier's daughter was too amazed to believe what she was seeing. She went on and saw a beautiful interior with an ivory stool inside, upon which a large dog sat. It was waited upon by 2 attendants, who fed it from a golden dish, and from time to time wiped its jaws with a silken handkerchief. Now and again they waved over the animal a fan of peacock's feathers to keep it cool, and the vizier's daughter, looking more closely, saw that the dog had round its neck a collar of 12 large rubies. "By what means can I take that collar to the king, to show him that my father is innocent?" she asked herself. She was busy thinking about the whys and wherefores of the matter, and did not notice that all around were staring at her. Each said to the other, "Surely this is a merchant of most remarkable handsomeness." One rich merchant especially was struck by her charm of manner and dress, and sent a slave to request her to visit him, imagining her to be a man, of course. Seated in the rich merchant's shop, the daughter of the vizier saw that she had made a very good impression upon the other, and laughed to herself that the man should be so deceived. With great kindness, her host asked, after the barest of preliminaries, "From what land do you come, and where are you going when you leave here?" "My father," said the vizier's daughter, "is a buyer and seller of beautiful trifles, but, now being too old to travel, has sent me out in his stead to search for interesting items. This is my very first journey, coming as I do from the land of Roum, the city of Istanbul being my birthplace. Your name is so high here in Persia that I find myself most honoured to be invited under your roof. I am just on my way back to the caravanserai. Thank you for this pleasant talk." "My dear boy," said the old merchant, distressed at the thought that the handsome young man was leaving him, "stay, I beg you, a while in this shop of mine. It is unbecoming for a person of your type to remain in the serai. Also, I might be able to help you in business matters. Come, send for your belongings. I will arrange for a place where you can stay." Although the vizier's daughter protested at such generosity, the old merchant ordered one of his agents to go at once to the caravanserai and fetch the things. The young merchant sent a slave with the agent, and the matter was soon put in order. The old merchant closed his shop for the night, took the dog with the ruby collar under his arm, and went towards his house. The 2 Abyssinians placed the cages containing the men on their heads, and they went alongside. The old merchant took hold of his young acquaintance's hand as they walked along. The young merchant saw that the house was of extremely fine proportions, exquisitely furnished, and excellently staffed. Carpets were laid out on the grassy bank of a river which flowed through the garden of the house, and the dog's stool was placed there also. The 2 merchants were soon seated side by side on embroidered feather cushions. They both began to drink, and then servants started to lay the cloth with sumptuous foods. First they put some meat on a dish and carried it to the dog. The animal came down from his stool and ate as much as he wanted. He drank some water from a golden bowl, and then one of the servants wiped his mouth with a silken napkin. They then carried the dish to the 2 cages, and having unlocked the doors, took out the 2 men with long hair and long nails confined therein. The servants struck the men repeatedly with sticks, made them eat from the dog's plate and drink from the animal's bowl, and drove them with many blows back into the cages. Then they locked the doors and presented the keys to their master, the old merchant. When all this was over, the old merchant began to eat. The young merchant could not touch a thing. "Why do you not eat, my friend?" asked the host. "This behaviour seems to me to be quite repulsive," answered the young merchant. "Here is a dog being fed by servants and having its jaws wiped with a napkin, and then your two prisoners in cages are being fed with the leavings of that animal. Surely such degradation is not to be borne by any of the human race without madness." "You must hear my story, and then you may set your mind at rest," said the merchant. "But I cannot tell you until I know you better. It is too much of a sadness to me, this personal history, so I beg your leave to keep silent on the matter." "Very well," said the vizier's daughter. "If it is not proper to speak of it, I shall not press you yet." But she thought to herself that she must stay with him until such time as she could in some way manage to get hold of the dog's collar. 2 months passed, in which time no one even suspected that the young merchant was a woman. One day she said to her host, "I'm afraid that I must soon leave. I have no possibility of staying here. My business matters are to be referred to my father, who no doubt awaits me with great impatience." "Oh, most excellent young man," said the old merchant, "you cannot leave now that I have become so fond of you. For know that I have no son, and thought to make you my heir. Write to your parents and invite them here at all speed, so that I may settle my affairs upon you, and look upon you as my dear son. I am getting old now, and I hope that when I die you will bury me, and take for yourself all that I leave in this world." The young merchant then answered, "It is true, certainly, that you have been more than a friend to me, and have showed me all of a father's love in this short time I have known you. But my father is too old to make the journey here, and has lately sent me instructions of a most pressing nature, that I can no longer disobey them. Perhaps at some future date I might be able to return to see you, but that might be indeed a slim chance." "Well, my dear boy," said the other, "if you will not stay here with me, then I must go home with you and make the journey back to Rome, a place I have always wanted to see." So the arrangements were quickly made, and they set out. The dog with the ruby collar was included in the party, and the men in cages too were taken along. At last they were within a few miles of the city of Istanbul, and the merchants camped within sight of its beautiful domes. The young merchant said to the older, "Give me leave to ride on to tell my parents of our arrival, and to prepare a house for you near us." The old merchant gave permission, and the vizier's daughter rode off. She arrived at her parents' house, and quickly climbed the stairs to her mother's apartments. One of the slaves cried out, "Lady, lady, a man is here in our part of the house. Let him be beaten." But the daughter of the vizier called out, "Mother, look, I am your child." "Oh," cried the good woman, "what disaster is this, that you came back disgraced after so long a time, with your poor father still detained during the king's displeasure?" "Believe me," said the girl, "I am as innocent as when I left you. I have brought, by subterfuge, the very merchant who owns the dog with the ruby collar, of which my father spoke to the king. I dressed as a man for the journey, and went with my nurse's husband as a guard." So the mother, realizing that all was well, blessed her daughter and said, "I will believe all you say. Go now and do whatever is necessary to help your father regain his good name." The vizier's daughter, having once more donned her male attire, returned to the old merchant, who was riding towards her in great excitement, impatient at her absence. As they sat together, sipping the cool sherbet beside their tents and smoking the water pipe, a royal huntsman passed that way. Seeing the magnificence of the tents, and the servants, and the dog with the jewelled collar, the huntsman tarried a while and sat down with them, to drink with them and smoke. When he departed, it was with great amazement at having seen the treatment of the dog and of the men in the cages. He went straight to the court and described what he had seen. By degrees the story came to my ears, and I at once ordered my executioners to seek out that aged merchant and cut off his head for treating a dog better than human beings, however degraded. By coincidence, the same Frankish ambassador who had been there before was also present. A smile flitted across his face, and I became angry. "To display your teeth in my presence without due cause is most rude of you," I said with some heat. "Why have you smiled?" "Sire," said he. "I was merely thinking that it is now certain that your ancient adviser had indeed spoken the truth, so he should be released. Also, it occurred to me as unusual that, at the story of an idle person, your Majesty should order the death of so valued a subject. Find out the reason for this dog being treated like a prince, and the story behind the men in cages. It should make a most interesting tale." I then ordered that the merchant, the dog, the cages, and all concerned be brought into my court.